0413 hours. I'm watching 4 screens in a container on a pier in Bahrain, and none of them show a single human being on the water I care about. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is my thumb, hovering over one button that can turn 3 boats around before anyone gets hurt. Tonight, off the Iranian coast near Jask, 3 low-gray hulls are running dark, unmanned and armed, toward a pier that has never once been hit in 40 years of standoff. I signed off on this run 2 hours ago. I am not driving. I am watching. That distinction is about to matter more than anything else tonight. The target is a joint IRGCN fast attack pier and coastal radar node, 6 miles up a shallow inlet, guarding the approach to a missile boat basin Iran has quietly expanded for 3 years. Inside that basin, a covered dry dock shed, a fuel farm feeding it, and a low concrete command building with more antenna masts than a building that size should ever need. Take the mast down and every boat in that basin goes deaf for a season. What I don't know yet sitting in this container is that Iran moved a second radar into that basin 2 weeks ago. Nobody told me. I'm about to find out the hard way, along with 3 boats that can't ask me for help once they go quiet. The lead hull is 4 minutes from the first line of defense. Somewhere past that line, a duty crew is finishing tea, and they have no idea their morning is about to end early. I key my headset once, say nothing, and watch the range count down. The first thing standing between my boats and that pier is a radar mast on a hill 2 miles inland. A Sepair-class early warning set Iran bought to watch exactly this stretch of water. On paper, it's a strong set. 3-dimensional tracking, range past 200 miles against anything the size of a fighter. Altitude and bearing solved in the same sweep. I know the spec sheet. I helped write the threat brief on it. Here's what the spec sheet leaves out. That radar's lowest usable beam sits almost a full degree above the horizon by design, because pointing a beam at the water floods the receiver with wave clutter and buries every real target under it. 2 miles out, that beam floor already sits higher than my boats. They're 18 inches of freeboard riding flush with 3-foot swells. I watch the tactical picture stay clean. Not because we're lucky, because we're underneath a floor that radar can't lower without blinding itself on the sea. I give my boats 40 seconds inside that engagement envelope before it opens up, and I count every one of them. At 0421, the middle hull's camera turret catches a work light flick on at the pier. A human being just walked outside for a smoke, looked at flat black water, and walked back in. That's the whole engagement. No alarm. Just a 14-second gap where a real threat detector, a pair of trained eyes, almost worked and didn't. That was only the outer edge, I tell the empty container. The real net starts at the inlet mouth. 2 miles inside the inlet, the Iranian Navy has a battery of 3rd Cordad launchers dug into a revetment. A real medium-range system with real teeth. Track a target at 90 miles. Engage it past 45. Put a missile past Mach 4 into the sky in under 6 minutes from cold start. On any normal night, that battery owns the sky over this water out to the horizon. Tonight, it never gets a sky picture worth firing at, because nothing my boats are doing happens more than 4 feet above sea level. That's the theory versus reality pivot that decides half of what happens tonight. A surface-to-air battery is built to kill airplanes. Its whole fire control chain, the search radar, the tracking radar, the missile's own seeker, is tuned for targets that fly. Ask it to find something that floats, and it's like handing a hawk a photograph of a mouse and telling it to hunt underwater. The hardware doesn't fail. The assignment is wrong. What almost gets us instead is the human backup to that battery, a truck-mounted electronic warfare unit parked a half-mile off the pier road, built to jam GPS across this whole inlet. At 0428, my boat's position fixes go soft, then vanish completely. Every one of them in the same 9 seconds. For about 4 seconds, I stop breathing. I don't reach for the abort command yet, because I already know what's supposed to happen next. These hulls carry a second navigation solution that never touches a satellite. An inertial system cross-checked against a stored map of this exact inlet, shoreline points, the bend in the channel, the shape of a breakwater we photographed from a surveillance pass 3 weeks ago. The onboard computer starts stitching position from bearings on the coastline itself. Slower than GPS, blind to nothing an Iranian jammer can reach. My screen updates a few seconds later, 3 tracks still converging, still online, guided by a map instead of a satellite. Preparation just did what technology alone couldn't. At 0433, the mission almost ends for a different reason. The relay drone I've got orbiting at 8,000 feet, the only thing carrying video back to me from 3 boats that are otherwise deaf and mute by design, drops off my link. Gone. No warning, no distress call, just silence where a picture used to be. I have 30 seconds of nothing. 3 armed boats running toward an inhabited pier, and I can't see a single frame of what they're doing. This is the moment we built a second relay for, and I didn't think I'd ever need to say that sentence out loud. A backup aircraft, already airborne at a different altitude, already holding a cold link to the same 3 hulls, cuts in automatically the moment the primary goes dark. My picture stutters, then returns. 3 tracks, still converging, 11 seconds of blindness total. 11 seconds that would have ended most missions built on a single point of failure. I still don't know why the first relay dropped. I won't know until the debrief. What I know is that somebody planned for it to happen anyway, and that's the only reason I'm still watching a live picture at 0434. The original tasking was 1 target, the dry dock shed and the command mast beside it. At 0436, that changes. A thermal return I've been tracking for 6 minutes. A mid-sized vessel tied up at the north jetty that wasn't supposed to be there. Lights up as something worth more than the shed. Hull profile matches a Gadir-class midget submarine, tied up for maintenance instead of hidden underwater where it belongs. My tasking officer splits the strike in real time. Boat 1 keeps the command building. Boat 2 retasks to the submarine. Boat 3, carrying the heaviest payload, goes for the fuel farm feeding both. 4 tanks in a row, numbered 1 through 4 on my display. Tank 2 flagged as the largest and the closest to the jetty. Take the fuel first, and whatever survives the first hits burns without support for hours. That's the logic. That's the whole plan, decided in about 4 seconds by a person watching the same screen I am. At 0441, Boat 3 throttles up for the fuel farm, and the last human obstacle of the night steps into frame. A sentry on the jetty, rifle slung, walking his line the way he's walked it every night this month. He hears something wrong in the water before he sees it. Static instead of an engine note. He unslings his rifle and starts shouting into a radio. If that call lands 30 seconds sooner, a nearby ZU-23 twin cannon, hand-cranked, pouring almost 2,000 rounds a minute out to 1.5 miles, gets a real firing solution on a slow, unarmored hull. I watch the tracer line climb behind Boat 2 and miss high, correcting for a target that's already changed bearing. 1 boat takes splinter damage across its upper hull and keeps running. That's the cost tonight. Not zero. Just survivable. At 0444, Boat 1 buries itself into the command building's base at the waterline, the only place a shaped charge does real structural work against reinforced concrete, because water doesn't compress and shoves the blast straight up into the foundation instead of letting it vent into the sea. The mast comes down before the flash even finishes rolling across my screen. Boat 2 reaches the submarine's berth 4 seconds later. Less blast than the first hit, but placed low against the hull, enough to open the pressure vessel at the waterline. It won't dive again without a dry dock it no longer has. Boat 3's the one I watch longest, because fuel doesn't behave like anything else on this list. The first hit on Tank 2 throws a fireball I'd guess at 60 feet, more than enough to ignite Tank 1 beside it within a minute. Smoke visible from the coastal highway 5 miles out by the time I lose the picture to heat distortion. Secondary explosions keep going for most of an hour after my boats are already running for open water. 90% fuel expended exactly as planned, exactly as briefed, and for the first time all night, exactly as boring as a checklist. Final tally, the number I'll actually put in my report. 3 hulls launched, 0 lost, 1 damaged by cannon fire and still afloat. Command mast down, 1 midget submarine disabled at the pier, a fuel farm burning for most of an hour. Not 1 American within 300 yards of any of it. Pull back from the water and look at what this actually costs Iran. First, they lose a coastal command node they can't quietly replace, because everyone watching knows exactly where the next one goes and exactly how it dies. Second, every crew on this coast now has to assume the empty water in front of them might not be empty, which means slower boats, more fuel burned on precaution, more hours spent staring at nothing. Third, and this is the one that matters longest, Iran spent 40 years building an air defense net that watches the sky, and tonight the fight that actually happened never went above 4 feet of freeboard. That's not a hardware problem they can fix with a better radar. That's an assumption they built their whole coastline around, and it just failed in front of them. This wasn't about the fuel tanks or the mast or even the submarine. It was never really about destruction at all. It was about proving that paralysis costs less than a single missile and that the front door to that inlet doesn't need a human standing behind it anymore. I still had my thumb on that button the whole run. I never touched it. That's the part of tonight I keep coming back to. If you want to see how the other side answers this, and whether Iran's Navy has any move left that actually works against boats nobody's driving, that's next week's video. So get subscribed and turn notifications on so you don't miss it. Here's the question I want in the comments. If a Navy can lose 100 of these and never lose a sailor, does deterrence even mean what it used to mean? Drop your answer below. I read every one of them. Some nights the scariest thing in the water isn't the boat. It's the fact that nobody was steering it.